Hello, everybody. I am an INTP. When I first found out, I think I spent about 2 hours on the internet trying to find out what INTP was and how it worked. And then thereafter, I spent one more hour trying to change it from INTP to something else. When that couldn't work out, I spent some more time trying to figure out how I could work on the disadvantages of being INTP and maintain with and probably make the most of the advantages. Now, I don't know if that's your story, but if you are INTP, then you're in the right place, and this is a place we get to discuss everything concerning this minority MBTI group. Only 3 to 5% of the world's population. But boy, have they made a contribution to the human race. In the bottom right corner, the picture I have up has three historic figures. We have Charles Darwin, who made incredible contributions to how we understand our evolution here on Earth. And he faced lots of opposition for it. He had to go against the prevailing theory that pushed across at the time. And then there's Abraham Lincoln, who, as you may well know, led the US during the American Civil War. He had perhaps even greater opposition before he could make it as president. A few states seceded prior to that, and he had to fight a war and then get assassinated before he could live to see a completely free and peaceful America. And then we have Albert Einstein, who we mostly know for the theory of relativity and also made great contributions to the US's nuclear effort. But one thing we don't know about Einstein is that when Einstein was a boy, he was written off by his teachers. Yes, he wasn't given much of a chance. They said he was only good at science and not much more. And later in life, when he got married, his marriage wasn't too successful, if I put it mildly. And he generally had a problem in personal interactions, and it was way after that that he got some form of recognition for his efforts. And one thing we notice with all three figures is that they all went against prevailing notions of how the world was, how the world was supposed to be. Basically, they were going against the rules. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out is that one thing we as INTPs share is that we don't like to follow the rules. If we can, we try to go against them. We tend to think of rules as pointless hurdles more often than not. And let's admit it, it can cause a lot of friction. It can lead to a lot of problems at work, with families, and at school. And it often keeps us from achieving some of our goals because we can't stick it out. We can't last the whole journey because we've often screwed it up before it ends. We've often had to drop out of school because we couldn't get along with the lecturers, or we've often been expelled from work because we broke some office rule, you know, or we've had to strike it out by ourselves because our parents are mad at us for going against them on something that they told us not to do. And I think we shouldn't only stick to the disadvantages, but we could also point out the advantages that rule breaking has for us. It means we often think out of the box more than other people. And as you will notice from the three gentlemen I mentioned prior, we are not afraid to challenge existing notions, and that often makes us the first to discover certain things or the primary actors in world-changing events. Now, it also gets us into a position where we can be pretty creative when approaching anything, approaching problems, thinking of solutions to problems, and so on. But I think it also leads to a lack of focus on the INTP's part. And from my own experience, it also leads to a situation where it's hard for the INTP to have self-discipline because he or she is easily distracted. Solutions come up and you think what you were doing 10 minutes ago didn't make any sense. And you move on to the next thing, and before you know it, you've moved on to the next thing because you thought what you did then was incorrect or wasn't okay either. And it leads to a never-ending cycle which can sometimes lead to harmful ailments like depression, for example, because you end up feeling you're in a rut. You can't progress. You're swimming in the same circle, and you can't move on at all. And I believe I believe that it's what leads many INTPs to feel even more isolated than they really are. Because let's face it, when it comes to isolation, well, we're perceived as introverts, but we have the advantage of being one of the few groups that can occupy their solitude with their thoughts. I mean, let's face it, who was an INTP hasn't had a situation where a whole day passes and it's supposed to be a boring day for the majority of the populace, but for the INTP, it was very interesting because they were thinking up a new theory, thinking of um, how differently they could have solved that assignment, or thinking of how they screwed up with that girl 5 years ago and why they should have done things differently back then. It's weird, but that's what goes into the mind of an INTP. You never know what comes up. And yeah, I think that places us at a slight advantage compared to other groups. We, we're not necessarily bored easily. Well, we're bored easily with other people, but not in our mind. Definitely not in our mind. Definitely not. And I mean, we're also known for uh, being able to make smart decisions. Um, and I mean, I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree we tend to think through our decisions way more than others will. But I think there's a problem uh, with us not involving other people when solving our problems. Um, what I mean is we often solve problems with a limited data set. We solve them based on what we know, which all too often isn't enough because we haven't interacted with enough people. Our introverted nature makes us miss out on a lot of opportunities. So we get ourselves making good decisions on what we have, but we could actually have been making uh, easier decisions with a bigger payoff had we known something that others know that we couldn't know because we couldn't get in touch with them. We were too introverted to do so. Yeah, and I think we pay a cost in terms of that as INTPs. We pay a cost in terms of that all the time. I guess that's karma's way of making up for our advantage when it comes to thinking through things.